advocate. She earned her CBA in 2018 and holds a Master in Public Administration, specializing in nonprofit management from the University of North Texas. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca for the presentation. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here. We really, really appreciate it.
Oh, of course. I'm so excited to be here today. I think Jordan may have gotten, she might have had, Jordan may have had some technical issues. So I started the recording on my end. So if something happens, then, and it gets shared differently, then that's why. All right, let me pull up my presentation. So thank you so much to everybody who is joining today. I want to give a big thank you to Kathy, Gretchen, and Jordania for their support for today's presentation. My hope is that today we can collectively pause, reflect, and encourage each other as we go through this presentation. I ask that you contribute your own thoughts and reflections in the chat box. We have a smaller crew today, so it will be a nice intimate group where we can have some good discussion. We're going to talk about some heavy things today. So before we do that, and before I tell you about myself or anything like that, I'd like for us to do some box breathing. And if you haven't heard of box breathing before, this is a breathing technique that can help realign your breathing so that it's a calmer pattern of breathing. You know, especially in times of stress, which I have anxiety and experience that on the regular. I take this time to box breathe, which is breathing in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, and repeat. So I'd like for us to do that 2 times. So on your own, go ahead and breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out, hold, and repeat. In, hold, out, hold. You can begin breathing normally again. I just find that that is really helpful in stressful situations or when your mind is going a mile a minute. Just to focus on something as simple as your breathing can help you. So for those that have seen this presentation before, the llama is back. And for those seeing this for the first time, I use this picture simply because me and this llama are really cute together, and it looks like we're reconnecting at a 10-year high school reunion, and I love it so much. So that is me and my llama friend. I'm not going to go over all of this since Jordania did such a great job. And I do want to point out one thing that is not listed here is that I am not a medical professional or a mental health expert, which will tie into some of the things that we're talking about. I provide my own views and thoughts as a practitioner in the field, and I use theories from people who are far smarter than myself to support my own thoughts. So this is what we're going to cover today. I do want to give you a little heads up that we will be discussing some of the negative aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic together, and you may have an emotional response to those. You may identify with some of these situations, and I want you to know that I am there with you. You are among friends who have experienced similar emotions. And I think we are all experiencing varying degrees of trauma as a part of the pandemic, and frankly, other things that are happening around the world right now. It can cause us to have triggers activated and emotional responses to follow. And my hope is that this discussion will help reframe setbacks into opportunities for not only our volunteer programs, but for each of us as individuals. So we will look at these difficult topics and then turn to opportunities to create meaningful change for volunteers, our programs, and ourselves. All right, so I want to read this quote to you really quick. One of the paradoxes of grief is that when you have the least amount to give to someone else, an act of altruism may actually be very helpful in healing. And that is from the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. And I read that to you before I tell you this little story about my father-in-law. That's my father-in-law, Jerry. In early 2010, 3 months before my wedding to my husband, David, he and Jerry were hiking Enchanted Rock a few hours outside of Austin. And about 20 minutes into the hike, Jerry started showing some really scary signs that he was having a stroke on a mountain. They turned around as fast as they could. And by the time they got to the car, Jerry could no longer lift his legs into the car and had to have assistance. So during the longest hour-and-a-half drive of his life, David got to the closest hospital where Jerry went straight into emergency surgery to remove clots that traveled from his neck to his brain. And he was there for several weeks in the ICU. And Austin is not his home. He lives in North Texas, and at the time he did. And so he was far away from home and had nothing with him. After leaving the hospital, Jerry could no longer speak or use half of his body. He was no longer able to work and had to be cared for at a long-term care facility. And right up until this happened, he was working full-time and he was completely independent. He lost himself in this process and his identity and his routine. He began diving into a deep depression and experienced extreme anxiety with no words to verbalize his emotion. He had what's called aphasia, and that left him without words to articulate how he was feeling. So after several years of slowly recovering and gaining more independence and language, Jerry decided that the path he was on wasn't working for him anymore. He decided to start volunteering at an organization called Our Daily Bread. And it is an organization that feeds, shelters, and cares for homeless and at risk in the community while maintaining the dignity of their guests and offering opportunities for a new start. That was offered to the clients of this organization, but that's exactly what Jerry needed as a volunteer. So through volunteering, Jerry regained a sense of purpose, perspective, and willpower. The organization opened their doors to this man who could barely talk, who could only use one arm and didn't have a car to get there, and he couldn't drive it even if he had one. Despite the obstacles, Jerry was given an opportunity to feel human again, which led to him regaining his life back. Healing is what you offer volunteers. Healing through service to others, healing through purpose, and healing through community. During this presentation, I ask that you reframe your role into one that not only serves your organization, but serves the needs of volunteers, both emotionally and in other ways that you can support volunteers as well. All right. So let's talk about the state of mental health right now. There's something called the second pandemic, and these are the negative emotional and social impacts the pandemic has had and will have on society now and in the future. And this applies to other kinds of traumas as well. There are long-term effects that happen after a trauma takes place. The ongoing effects of the trauma will be studied for generations to come. And not surprisingly, rates of depression, anxiety, PTSD, insomnia, and burnout have skyrocketed. The Lancet reports that in 2020 alone, cases of mental disorders skyrocketed during the pandemic, including 53 million new cases of major depressive order and 76 million new cases of anxiety disorders. Social anxiety after long periods of isolation and quarantining, and we know that will have long-term negative impacts on someone's life. Corona-related loneliness, the need for authentic and deeper sources of social connection, not just surface level, but where we have the ability to openly emote without fear of judgment. Unhealthy behaviors such as overeating, undereating, smoking, abusing alcohol and drugs, those are on the rise. And deferred health care. This is putting off health care for non-critical but chronic and emergency situations. Almost always this will have a negative impact. You think about someone with diabetes not getting the care that they need. These are issues that are risking people's lives. For safety concerns, financial concerns, or lack of access to technology for telemedicine, people are not able to get the care that they need. All right, so the impact of COVID-19 on volunteerism. These are impacts that we saw in many organizations during the beginning of the pandemic and may be experiencing again now. Organizations closed their doors and their services to the public. I'm sure many of us thought, how is this possible? Some organizations didn't have a choice. They had to stay open because of the services that they are providing. But when you have a normalcy that is there one day and gone the next, that's really difficult to even comprehend. Larger organizations may have been able to pivot, but the vast majority of nonprofits, which are smaller, were unable to leave a gap in services in their area. They had to continue on. So what are some of the critical needs your organization wasn't prepared for? I'm thinking about the increased volume of services, reaching out to your clients, providing the continual supervision and guidance that you needed to provide to your volunteers or your clients. So hop into the chat box and share your thoughts on what were surprises for you and your organization during the pandemic. And while you're doing that, I'm going to keep moving on, but I'd like to come back and see what people are saying in the chat. So the impact of COVID-19 on volunteerism in the long term, there has been a change of operations on a daily basis in relation to safety concerns and, having to remap how people walk through our buildings and facilities. And volunteer retention has decreased for sure. And questions of who is the authority, whether it is your organization, local government, county or federal, where are you getting your information and how is it consistent across your organization? And then unfortunately, while new data is being produced every day and we understand COVID-19 better than we did in 2020, there's still a high prevalence of misinformation that is not based on fact. And it can be difficult to really decipher what is a credible source of information. And that's especially difficult when we are communicating with our volunteers about what are our standards and what is truth about what happens within our organization in relation to COVID-19 and how you are continuing to serve your communities. And then burnout. Burnout is real. I had it bad in 2020, and I know so many people did. And it's ironic because that's when I felt like I was doing the least amount of work for my position because we had no volunteers. But burnout is definitely real. And it can be burnout from your job or just from the situation that you're currently in your own life, having to deal with the difficult situations that you face during pandemics on a regular basis. All right, so let's talk about the impact it has had on our organization. So in our organizations, we've lost connections. We've lost our volunteers, our donors, our supporters, and our allies. Many of us are on the road to recovery and reconnecting with those supporters, but many of us are still at ground zero, and we are still figuring out how do we reconnect with those lost connections. And if we can't reconnect with those lost connections, how do we create new ones? We have to rebuild those relationships and hopefully continue the care and the service that we were providing before. So lost resources, program budgets were cut. It was a reality when you don't have volunteers on site to volunteer, that your program is not going to be resourced in the same way it was. Staffing was reduced, volunteers were gone, opportunities to grow together in person and define a collective purpose and momentum. The feeling of starting over after the pause button was hit hard was very real. I think many people were dormant for so long that when it came time to restart, it felt overwhelming to do so. Operations that are changing constantly depending on new COVID-19 mandates and policies about masks, capacity, et cetera. And thinking about social distancing, navigating potential risks, et cetera, is always on the top of our mind as volunteer engagement professionals and how we will navigate these things as advocates for our volunteers. So if you'd like to, please go over to the chat and share how COVID-19 has impacted your organization. I'm seeing a lot of stuff coming through about how it has. So I'm seeing that volunteers were gone for long periods of time. COVID policies had to keep changing. When I was with Habitat for Humanity in the early stages of the pandemic, we had to limit the number of volunteers on site. So all of these things can change really quickly as well, which can cause burnout when you don't know what the day is going to bring with a change of policies or a change of environment with volunteers there or maybe not there. So I want to turn to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I want to know how many of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you can raise your hand and tell me, is this something new to you? You probably have heard of it in our, ninth grade psychology class at, in your high school. But I wanted to reframe it today to look at it as a volunteer edition of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So people have 5 levels of needs, and to meet those needs higher up, the more basic needs must be met first. So in this again, in this theory, higher needs can only be achieved when those base level ones are achieved first. So we can create opportunities for volunteers to meet those basic needs and those higher level needs, or we can remove the barriers that are in place for them to continuing to grow and excel at what they're doing. Okay. I have 2 arrows on my screen and I keep hitting the wrong one. So let's talk about this first level. So physiological accessibility to volunteer opportunities. These are things, first let me talk about in a general sense what this means. So to live as a human, we need oxygen, food, water, sleep. These are all very basic functions that we need to achieve before we're able to do anything else in our life. So thinking about it in terms of our volunteers need accessibility to your program. They need to be able to access your volunteer opportunities. And so we can think about how are we making our volunteer opportunities available to those who want to serve with us, especially those who are in the communities that we are serving. Ideally, our staff and our volunteer composition would be representative of the culture and the population that you are serving. And so you want to be thinking about that in your recruitment efforts. How are you dismantling barriers to entry for your volunteer program? I highly recommend Connecting the Cause by Brianna Dorella. She has a website with great information, and she also does speaking. She does presentations on this, and she talks about things like saviorism and access to programs and representation in your programs. So I highly recommend attending one of her presentations. So next, safety. So in our own lives, we expect security of body, employment opportunities, resources, medicine, healthcare, property, things that can help keep us safe in our daily lives. And so what this looks like for volunteers, especially right now during COVID, is the safety of volunteering within our facilities. And so, obvious ones include a safe working environment where policies and procedures are clearly outlined for things like masks, social distancing, what happens when you've been exposed to COVID-19. Is there, excuse me, is there proper supervision and support from staff? Does the volunteer feel that the organization is working within its mission and ethically it's moving forward, and that the time that they are giving is used properly, and that they will be in safe working conditions while they are with us. All right. The next one is love and belonging, which is my favorite. So in our own lives, we need friendship, we need intimacy, we connect with family and we connect with community. And because of the field of work that we are in, I have a feeling that many of you seek that as well in your own lives. So you understand what it's like. So for volunteers, we can ask ourselves, do they have opportunities to connect with others and feel a part of something bigger than themselves? Is your program inclusive, and do you treat all volunteers equitably? So are there personal connections with your volunteers? Are they able to meet each other, know each other, and grow as a community together? Next is esteem. And, in our own lives, that looks like the confidence that we need to be able to do our jobs, do our volunteer work, lead others, achievement and respect for and from others within our own lives. Do we feel confident in how we can relate to other people? Do we feel confident that we are included in, in every aspect of our lives within the people that are in our surrounding bubble? For volunteers, it's really about confidence in their abilities to fill their volunteer role, a sense of achievement and contribution to your mission within your organization, and understanding the impact that they are having. Do they understand the end user of whatever your organization is doing, and how they are contributing to the success and the positive experience that those people are having, or animals, or who else you serve? All right, and then self-actualization. This is the highest level of achievement that you can go. There's probably more higher, but on Maslow's theory, this is the highest you can go is self-actualization. And in our own lives, that looks like achieving morality, having freedom for creativity and spontaneity. Do you have critical thinking skills? Are you able to problem solve? Do you have a lack of prejudice towards others? And do you have an acceptance of facts? Also a really important one nowadays. For volunteers, this is something that is really important, and it's an ability to live through their own values, to think critically and have a broadened perspective of their own lives through their volunteer service, and have a positive sense of identity aligned with the mission of your organization. So my hope is that you are seeing how these things not only serve the people your organization intends to serve, but also can serve your volunteers as well through their service to your organization. So which one of these, I'd like you to go over to the chat and tell me which one of these stands out to you as an area that your organization is doing really well with, or one that your organization could improve upon. So we'll take a few seconds to see who's talking in the chat room. Mandy said all have rooms for improvement, but safety has been the primary focus through the pandemic. Absolutely. We struggle with esteem and completing volunteer role assignment, love and belonging, safety. So when you are going through your planning process within your department and you're discussing what is important to work on, you can bring this theory to your team to talk about areas for improvement or how to recognize the things that you are doing really well. If you want to do a SWOT analysis, which is your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and what's that T?
It's threats.
Threats. There we go. Yeah, thanks, Heather. I think this could be a helpful tool for you. So we'll move on, because there are a few things that I want you to add to your job description that may not be on there right now. And these are kind of broad, but these are things that I hope you can start to identify with as a part of who you are in your role as a volunteer engagement professional. So first, you are a community creator. You are the central figure in your organization that brings individuals from different walks of life into one community, creating a collective of change makers. This fulfills their need for love and belonging, which I think is so cool that you have the opportunity to not only serve, the organization, but also the people who are coming to your organization to serve and see them as whole individuals, as opposed to a cog in the wheel of how you are going to get things done in your organization. So you are a community creator. You are a purpose provider. You help volunteers identify a purpose where they can create meaningful change and impact. You have the opportunity to help them build their self-esteem and achieve self-actualization through the service that they provide to your organization. And so you can help them see their impact as a part of who they are, so that they can have that positive esteem of who they are and what they are doing, that it's for a bigger cause and to better their community and to better themselves. And finally, you are a soul healer. So through everything, you invite volunteers to change their perspective, see things in a new light, and transform brokenness into fulfillment through service. I'd like you to tell me, do any of these resonate with you that maybe you hadn't identified before in yourself, but that you can see now as something that you relate to? Yeah, Naomi says those are wonderful things to add to your positions. Absolutely. Dominique says she is a community creator. You are so much more than recruiting people, getting them to serve, giving them orientation, doing the follow-up survey. You have so much more opportunity within your position to really create meaningful change in people's lives. Soul healer. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so let's turn a corner here and talk about something a little different. So in this photo, you can see this is my mom, and this is me, and that's my sister Barbara. And we are celebrating Shabbat, which my family did every week growing up. On Friday night, we would say the Shabbat prayers, and we would go to services sometimes. Other times we would stay at home as a family and light the candles, sing Shabbat prayers, and slow down to reflect. And that is really what Shabbat is about, is recovering from the week behind you so that you can pause and have a bookend from that week before you start your next week. And so this was a really important time for us to reset and to be able to be together as a family, especially during our own really busy lives right now. That is so important. It's hard to connect. I know I find myself, talking to my friends about the next time that we'll get dinner together is, okay, well, it's going to be a month and a half because of everything that we have going on in our own lives. So it's good to slow down and to reflect and take time to be together. So I'd like to tie that into this book, The Power of Ritual by Casper Tikal. And he talks about ritual or a Sabbath and how it can be beneficial to us and how it can be beneficial to the emotional and social needs of volunteers as well. So a ritual is a sense of continuity that provides a sense of control when so much feels out of our control. Volunteering can be a respite and a source of continuity and a way to see productivity in action. Sometimes it's just about that forward momentum. And ritual volunteering rather often takes people out of their everyday lives that they would not normally experience a new opportunity like volunteering in a different environment. And so it's a time for them to be able to disconnect from their own lives and to have a different perspective of what is going on in other people's lives, whether it's the people they're serving, their fellow volunteers, or the health of your organization. And so volunteering can be a Sabbath. It can be that respite and that time away from the rest of the world. So some things that you can do to help encourage volunteering as a ritual and as a Sabbath is to treat it like a Sabbath. Know that this is a time your volunteers are stepping away from their everyday lives and coming to your organization. That is something special. It may be something you see every day, but it's not something that they do every single day. We will always have those volunteers that are exceptional volunteers that have been with us for a long time and do make this a part of their daily lives, but vast majority of volunteers are not. So this is true for anyone who's coming one time or multiple times or every day. Something that we can do is creating volunteering as a Sabbath. So be prepared. Make sure that you are always prepared when volunteers are expected and have a backup plan. So we really want volunteers to know what to expect when they come to volunteer. Especially for people who have never volunteered before. We don't want them coming to our organizations and feeling like they're on their own to figure things out. So be prepared with instructions, guidance about where are the restrooms, where do you put your bags, what's going to happen next. So providing an agenda of the day can help them feel more prepared. Again, have a backup plan because sometimes things will happen where, production in a food bank, something was already completed before this volunteer shift, or you need to pivot to meet another need that you can only meet with volunteers. And so be flexible to pivot in the face of change so that your volunteers are working constantly while they are volunteering. Because the worst thing is when a volunteer comes to your organization and you find out after they've arrived that you have nothing for them to do. Always have something ready for volunteers to do. And create small rituals, which can be simple things like where do they pick up their badge? Having a monthly volunteer of the month announcement. I really like to see statements about the impact that volunteers have. So when I worked at the North Texas Food Bank, after each shift, we would tell our volunteers, you packed this many pounds, which is this much food, and it's going to serve this many people. So they walk away knowing I had this impact today. During my 2 hours, I was able to pack 60,000 pounds of food with my team so that we could serve so many people. And then ritual takes intention, attention, and repetition. this is something to practice, something to continually work on so that you can fine tune these practices so volunteers can continue to feel that ritual when they come into your organization. So community. Volunteers hold the desire to be a part of a greater good and a part of a bigger picture. Volunteering combats isolation and brings volunteers into a different and new environment. So what are some ways that you can create community in your organization? And I'd love for you to drop in the chat if you have other ideas, feel free to share them. So have you considered a mentorship or a buddy system for volunteers? Maybe it's for people of common interests, or it could be a newer volunteer who is shadowing a more experienced volunteer, giving them a connection, someone they can look for when they come into the room the next time they volunteer. Volunteers as members. I like to see volunteers of members of our organization. It feels less transactional to me when we look at our volunteers as someone who is a member or a part of what we are doing to serve the community. It feels less transactional and more like we are interested in what the volunteer is getting out of the experience as well. And what are our expectations for them, but what are their expectations from us? And then providing opportunities for volunteers to connect, whether it's while they're volunteering or outside of volunteering. That can be done through socials. It can be done through, town halls or things like that, where people are away from their volunteer service, but have the opportunity to speak about it or to talk about what's going on in their personal lives. It could also be as simple as having the board in your hallway have photos of your new volunteers so that when people see their faces, they can say hello and welcome them to the organization. So think about different ways that you can create community and make people feel welcome and a part of something. So another part of providing volunteer opportunities is a part of, a couple of other things I didn't mention would include maybe having name tags so that volunteers feel a part of something that requires a name tag, but also gives other people a chance to see their names, kind of like having their photos up in the hallway. And then public recognition. I think a lot of people are open to being recognized publicly, but sometimes it's even one-on-one, just saying thank you is important as well. And that kind of ties into our next topic about achievement. So with achievement, so much has been lost over the past couple of years, whether it's our jobs, loved ones, identities, purpose, and we have been asked to do so much with so little. And volunteering can serve as a catalyst for resiliency as volunteers better understand their part in achieving your mission. So that act of service is what volunteers can see as their way of contributing to others, but also making a difference in their own lives. So can you build opportunities for reflection so volunteers can continue to immerse themselves in your cause and in your community? So that can be like talking about the impact they have at the end of each shift. An organization that I've worked with, I love that they send an email at the end of each month collectively to all of those volunteers. So they can talk about the entire month and maybe include a quote from a client that they served about how this is affecting them or impacting their lives by having this service available to them. And spark fulfillment by painting that picture. And I think that ties directly into, having an end user be able to express the impact that what volunteers are doing on their lives. Paint as much of a picture as you can from the abstract to more measurable. It can be quantifiable, qualitative, different measurables that can help people understand that information. And of course, stories. And remember that people react, they perceive information in different ways. So it's a good idea to have a multifaceted approach into how you will communicate this information. And don't wait to celebrate milestones. You know, next month is National Volunteer Appreciation Month. So I know we're all busy thinking about how are we going to celebrate our volunteers. But April is not the only month that we should be appreciating our volunteers. I know you all know that. So what is your annual plan for appreciating your volunteers on a regular basis? You know, whether it's based off of their impact, their skills, what they're doing outside of your organization. So this is all a part of seeing your volunteers as a whole self, as opposed to someone who just provides service to your organization. So these are the three things that we've talked about: ritual, community, and achievement. And I'd love to know if you see any opportunities for your organization to improve the experience for your volunteers based off of these three things: ritual, community, and achievement. So what is your number one area that you would like to focus on this year in your volunteer program from these three? Community. Anne says community. Thanks, Anne. Community, ritual. Karen, we all want achievement too. And maybe it's taking a bite approach to all of these at the same time. Gretchen says, do I have to pick? Yeah, maybe you don't. It's all about what is your capacity and where are you going to find the most impact for your volunteers. And some of these different ways can tie into each other. It's really about your capacity. All right. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and I would like to see, are there any questions in the chat? Or if you feel comfortable coming off of mute, then you are welcome to do that. Actually, I'm not sure if that is a skill or a thing that we can do on this webinar, but if you have something that you want to include in the chat, it would be a great time to do it.
I don't think they can come off mute, but if they throw a question in the chat, Gretchen and I will share it and we'll discuss.
Well, if there aren't questions, maybe they'll populate while we're talking. Can you tell me a takeaway that you have from this presentation, something that is your next step, your number one action item from this presentation and what you'll be working on? Be big or small.
Becca, Heather did have a question earlier on. She said, does in-person volunteer training count as creating a community for them?
It counts as creating community, creating ritual. It has every opportunity. That is really your time to tell the story of your organization and tell volunteers about what they are doing to contribute to your overall mission and see themselves as a collective of people who have similar values. And, you know, I think in volunteering, people have a mindset of celebrating each other because it is something that's outside of their norm. And so encourage people to create community through acknowledgement of each other's work and how they have been successful in what they're doing.
Catherine asked, how long do you think it will take to come past the second pandemic?
Listen, I am someone who thinks that if you breathe, you should have therapy. Just as an individual, and especially people who are in this service field, it can be very quick for us to lose ourselves in the service that we do and the work that we do. So self-care is so incredibly important. I think it's up to every individual and their own, you know, capacity for how long they will take to get over this mental health second pandemic. But I think it's important that we create an air of transparency and grace for each other, so that that also creates a sense of community. so that people know it's okay to be a human being and bring your whole self to work, to volunteer, and you will not be seen any less for it. If anything, I think we've been more vulnerable over the past 2.5 years, and it's created such strong connections with the people that we work with, and the causes that we care about.
Yeah, definitely. Victoria said that she will definitely be implementing all of these elements as they rebuild their volunteer crew. Um, Catherine asked, is there a way to create ritual and community with event volunteers, one-time volunteers, to move them from one time to forever?
I love that question. And ultimately, that's a big goal for so many of our organizations. Our events and our one-time volunteer opportunities are a stepping stone. Personally, what has worked for me in those situations is having a very well-structured onboarding process, even for volunteers that are serving one time, so that they have a very clear expectation of what they will see when they come to volunteer with us, so that when they leave, they say, I had such a great time because I felt confident in what I was doing. I felt prepared, and I feel like volunteers were really valued as a part of this event. And then continuing the conversation however you can after the event, letting them know about the success of what they did, offering to take photos and encourage them to share and connect with their community about what they've done. And one thing that an organization that I worked with previously has done is they had a photo wall, that was where, at the end of a volunteer shift, they had this beautiful wall where volunteers could stand in front of and take photos of their whole team together, whether it's a corporate group or a faith-based group, or one or two people who came together that want to volunteer. I think your branding is a big part of that. So incorporating your service, and branding your service as a part of your overall organization can further tie people into your program.
Yeah, definitely. Mary said that she loved the idea of sharing the volunteer impact in your monthly emails. It's so important to acknowledge the value of volunteers, that the volunteers add to your organization and your mission.
And
Definitely.
internally, that's also really important as
Yeah,
well. So not just to your volunteers, but I mean, whoever in the world will listen, you need to share the good work that your volunteers are doing. Up, down, all around. That's my go-to is always who's up that needs to know what you're doing, who's below you, and who's beside you that you can share this information with.
definitely. Mandy said the biggest thing she thinks she needs to do is help her colleagues see her volunteers as more than hands to do the work, that they don't have the time, talent to do or help with kids when they're exhausted, that they burn out, since we all do, but she can't seem to get them to understand that volunteers are important beyond the practical.
Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty common frame of thinking, for staff that do not have volunteer engagement in their job description. And you can ask people, can you do this? Can you help further what we're doing? And they are going to say, well, I don't even have time to do my own job. How can I add that to my list of responsibilities? And that's really about creating the culture within your organization around volunteers. And that does not have to come from your CEO. It can come from you in talking about the impact that your volunteers are having. And I made a recent job transition to a new organization, but previously I was with the city of Plano, and we tried very hard to make it as simple as possible for our different departments to utilize volunteers, volunteer services. So they didn't have to go through a really lengthy process to tell us what their needs were. And we were very big on anticipating the needs of our departments. We had an annual plan. We knew what month certain events that were happening, or when there was going to be a big project that needed to get done. We had communication with our departments about what can we expect. And we can think outside the box. Oh, you could probably use volunteer services to help in this concept or in this aspect. So offering up ideas, but also helping them really see the impact of what volunteers are doing in your organization. And I'm big on training, as you heard in my bio. I think that training staff who don't have volunteer engagement in their job description is crucial in providing a good experience for our volunteers. So if your organization has a policy about customer service, volunteers are customers as well. They should be treating everyone in your organization, including volunteers, with the same respect.
Definitely. So we've had definitely some more questions and comments come through. We will be continuing the conversation with Rebecca on LinkedIn. You should see the link there in the chat. Please follow that link and head over to LinkedIn. Here is Rebecca's information to stay in touch with her. We'll be posting some of those questions over on the LinkedIn page and continuing to talk to Rebecca for the next 48 hours. So definitely go over there and jump in on the conversation. Gretchen just posted that again. Rebecca, any final thoughts before we switch over to some announcements?
Thank you so much for having me. I hope that this was helpful. I tend to think bigger picture, so I hope that you were able to find some nuggets that gave you some more prompts to think more specifically about your programs and your volunteers.
Yeah, this was a fantastic presentation. I really, really appreciate you coming and talking to us, and wonderful information and great content. I definitely have like a page and a half of notes here. So.
Oh, good. Thank you.
All right. Well, if you will stop sharing, I'm going to share a couple of announcements we have for ALVE here as we kind of wrap up. Like we said, you get to continue the conversation with Rebecca. She's not through with us yet. She'll be over on LinkedIn for the next 48 hours, answering any questions you have, connecting with you, networking with you, and everyone who was on the call today. We encourage you to be able to go over there and network with others who are working through some of the same issues and trying to figure this all out. We also encourage you to save the date for a couple more ALVE Academies coming up the next couple of months. April 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern, we'll have Joe here talking to us about low to no budget volunteer appreciation, which is super, super important for all of those who lost your budget or limited your budget this last couple of years or never had one to begin with. Looking forward to that presentation. And then May 6th, also save the date, 2 p.m. Eastern, we'll have David here, and he will be talking about understanding the challenges volunteer administrators face, and showing some results from recent research studies. If you're interested in presenting at an ALVE Academy, please let us know. Kathy is here in the chat, but her email is right down here. Please take that down. It's a great way to level up your career and gain great experience, and kind of get your name out there in the volunteer management community. We would love to have, if you have an interesting topic you'd love to talk about, please join us for an ALVE Academy. We'd love to chat with you about that. We also have committee positions open at ALVE in our membership and marketing and our program and advocacy committee, who facilitates the ALVE Academies. So please visit our website, volunteeralive.org, to check out how you can get involved in a committee position. There are so many positions available and so many levels of involvement. If you just have a little bit of time every month to help out, we can find a spot for you. If you have a lot of time that you're looking to fill, we can definitely put you to work as well. It's a great way to become a volunteer yourself and give back to an organization that is putting together good content for you. So definitely check that out on our website. Thank you, Rebecca, so much for being with us today. We really appreciate you and all of the information you provided today. Wonderful webinar. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with you on LinkedIn.
Thanks so much, y'all.
All right, we are almost on the hour. And again, thank you so much, Becca, and congratulations. And I don't know if I know some of the Jewish holidays, it's not really necessarily a joyous greeting, but I think Happy Purim is a mostly joyous greeting. Yes, so enjoy.
It's a happy one.
And we will see. It's a happy one. Yeah, that's what I heard. They tried to kill us, they didn't. Let's eat, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. Look it up. It's very interesting. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Jordania, for being a host. And again, we'll have the slides and the recording posted in a few days on the ALVE members only site. And again, everybody have a great rest of the week. We'll see you at the next ALVE Academy, if not sooner.